Welcome to it. It's the Sunday live edition of the Average Joe Sports Show. That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. How we feeling, boys? 14-7, 5-1. And it was apparently an endangered species moment for several if you're a ranked team on last Saturday.
Hey, 5-1 is 5-1. There's unlimited chaos in college football. Nebraska wakes up, they're 5-1. And they got a week off and a much-needed bye week. Take it and run.
Look, college football and the TV execs got exactly what they wanted. They wanted big-time matchups every week. It looks like the bowl season. When you take a look at who's playing who, this was supposed to have been kind of an off week schedule-wise with A&M and Missouri was the marquee game going into the weekend, and it was an afterthought by the time Nebraska kicked off against Rutgers. Now it's just survive in advance. 5-1. Nebraska fans should be happy with it. Reaction shows should have been very short last night, but they weren't. But look, this is what TV wanted. And Nebraska fans and college football fans everywhere have to be satisfied anytime you're on the right side of the win-loss ledger.
And I'll just say it's if we're talking positives out of this game, I went and rewatched the game last night to give myself a better sense following our reaction show yesterday.
Wait a minute. How could you rewatch the game when you had USC Minnesota on and then the ACC fog in Berkeley that went until after midnight? I
stay up late.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. You're younger than the other three panelists on this show.
Yeah, my roommate is over there. I don't think I started rewatching until probably like 12:45, 1 in the morning. So we got it done. And I will say, you can be encouraged by that Husker defensive performance. I think one thing that didn't necessarily come through on the TV broadcast yesterday was just how swirling that wind was. They mentioned the wind on the TV broadcast, but being there and seeing the flags from the north end zone to the south end zone to the Jumbotron, and they're all moving in different directions, kind of sold to me when I was at the game just how bad that wind was. I don't think it necessarily came through on television. So wasn't surprising that it was a gross offensive day, but you can still be encouraged by that Husker defensive performance because that was the Husker defense we came into the year expecting.
Hey, we're going to talk about the defense, and rightfully so, in Buschini, but can we start with the conditions? Because they changed from north to south after both teams had warmed up. Let's start with Dylan Raiola, because Nebraska won a football game with below average quarterback play for the majority of the game. And I think we're all waiting to see, man, I wonder when Dylan rolls into the interview room if he's got the sniffles or if he just is under the weather, because things didn't seem right. I'm wondering if, among other things like Rutgers and shutting down the run game and not wanting to make a mistake or then wanting to throw a knockout punch, if the conditions in Memorial Stadium that Dylan Raiola has never encountered, if that messed with him, because he was not right after that 7 of 10 start. That that included the interception. I wonder if the conditions really, really messed with him and overthinking some things as that game progressed.
And I was wondering maybe if he got too close to Schmidt during that Tuesday presser, if he caught a bug.
I kept my distance Tuesday, and for the record, Elway, I was fine Tuesday. But let's get that torch lit. A-hole on the Average Joe show got a quarterback sick.
Well, I know it's how do I say this? He went to being a slow blinker.
Yeah.
To borrow, a phrase from Wackadoodle, who used to be the quarterback coach at Nebraska, is, there was a Bonner play out in the flat. There was a Barney play deep that usually Dylan sees that right away. And when he sees it, he throws it. And he waited. And I don't know if there was a fear of throwing an interception or, there were some other plays during the course in the passing game in that second half where I thought were given to him that Rutgers was going to let him have. And he was more looking for the big ball downfield. It was a very disjointed game on that side of the ball from one half to the other. But at the end of the day, thank God that defense played like the defense we expect, and you had an extension of the defense that had a nice right foot but a bad back.
Well, was that not the Husker formula that we thought we were going to have coming into this season? An elite defense that really shuts down an offense with a freshman quarterback that's still figuring it out. It's surprising to me that it took until game 6 for us to have a game that looked like that, where Dylan Ryle has some freshman moments. He doesn't necessarily look like the 5-star future All-American type quarterback that a lot of people kind of thought through the first 5 games of the season. Finally got that performance. And on the flip side of things, the defense finally showed up and had a suffocating day like we thought they'd have throughout this year. And that's kind of weird that we're sitting here slightly disappointed on a Sunday morning with how it looked, considering that's almost what we expected coming into the season. And I chalk it up mostly due to the weather.
Weather's a factor. I'll say this. What was Nebraska's offense? I asked this out loud. What were they expecting? What did they get Saturday? Yes, the conditions were going to be problematic with the wind, but Rutgers didn't send a lot of pressure. They didn't blitz him a whole lot. They had 7 in coverage, and their front 4, they came in with 4 sacks. They finished with 4 sacks. So their front 4 got some pressure. He just never really got into rhythm either, right? And to be patient is easier said than done. I think he was probably just frustrated that they weren't producing more big plays. Now, after that opening touchdown drive into the wind, by the way, 7 plays, 77 yards, they ran it, they screened it, they got a shock play to Barney down the field. So it might have been Banks, but it looked good early. And then in the second half, Rutgers kind of did their thing. So they got home with their 4. He had 7 in coverage, and there weren't a lot of guys running wide open either. I'll say that. I'll say that Rutgers secondary, despite being a lot of question marks with health, they came in and did a pretty good job of getting Nebraska D'd up. Lastly, some of the throws were short, and I think there was, to your point, Sharpie, the slow blinking, second guessing, not wanting to make a mistake. And let's be honest, he got put into a position where you're 0 for 5 in second half drives where you're going 3 and out for the most part. And you've got to respond somehow because the game's all of a sudden a 1-score game. That's part of this bigger process of learning how to win in these tight moments. And you know what? Maybe the moment was maybe the moment got to him in the offense because they had no rhythm.
I don't want to discount the input of the audience. Justin has blamed Schmidt, and Walter has seconded the motion. So all in favor say aye. So we got that on the table, and that's the reason. You know, he said after the game that he enjoys moments like this. Somebody asked him, what do you like about your freshman season and going playing college football? He said, I like games like this. I think he had a case of the Schianos. I think Nebraska ran into a team that's really well coached. And I think Nebraska, had a good start to the game again. They've had a lot of games this season other than Purdue where they've started pretty well. Adjustments get made. And I'm a big fan. I think we all are of what Greg Schiano has done at Rutgers. He's the perfect guy for that job. And they adjust. And I think the secondary probably threw some confusion into the game. And I thought you've seen in the Illinois game a little bit in the Purdue early on, now that Nebraska adjusted in the second half. But I think Nebraska ran into a well-coached defensive team that made adjustments as the game went on and made it a little more difficult for Dylan as he goes through the first half of his freshman season as the starting quarterback of a Big Ten program. I do also think that the conditions were baffling for anybody yesterday. Greg Schiano mentioned it. He had never been in a part in 37 years of coaching, had never seen weather conditions like that, where it's near 100 degrees with winds that rough. We talked about it on our KRNU broadcast. A couple of our guys talked to some Rutgers folks, and they said that Monangai was gassed after the first quarter. That the temperature on the field, and you're over there baking in the sun, and the wind is buffeting against you all day. I think that was a draining game for Rutgers. So the fact that they kept it competitive in the second half, I thought was impressive on their part. So I thought that their scheme was good. It got better. Nebraska survived and advanced.
Yeah, that was one thing that I did notice upon my rewatch last night was if you flip it around and if the offensive game plan for Rutgers was a Marcus Satterfield game plan, I think half of Husker Nation would have had a brain aneurysm. And you kind of lay it out with Monongai maybe being tired after that first quarter. The amount of first down passes after the first quarter for that Rutgers team was head scratching. And a tired Monongai would make that make a little bit more sense. But I was sitting there thinking that last night, I'm like, man, if I was a Rutgers fan, I would be pulling my hair out with some of this play calling. With as well as Monongai did in the first quarter, you don't go to him in the second quarter. I understand you're behind in the game, but still plenty of time left. The amount of time they had Callie McManus drop back on 1st and 10 and try to beat that Husker defense with his arm would have had me throwing my palms upward at the sky if I was a Rutgers fan. That was head scratching, but a tired Monongai can do that, and that's the effect of standing in the sun and baking on that far sideline.
Yeah, Go ahead, Schmidt.
Real quick. What in a game that has the wind blowing sideways from all corners of the stadium, what would prevent it to go armchair, to go heavy? Go heavy with the 6 offensive linemen look and just keep running counter till they stop it. And then maybe you slip in a tight end across the middle off a play action. Nebraska's run games, what I'm asking out loud. You got plenty of success with it when you had your extra best backup in the country in. And maybe you could have kept running that to death. Again, armchair quarterbacking on a Sunday morning.
Yeah. Can I and we can get to that because I think the running game and from the first half to the second half needs a discussion. But I want to go back to something Elijah and Bill were touching on about Monongai. I don't want to believe that he got tired. Yeah, it was hot out there, but this is a guy that is built to carry a heavy load. I'm going to tell you, Tony White got deep in his bag. So Monongai was doing everything he could in that first quarter, and he was having success. And we saw that a guy with vision, balance, power, he was going to be a load. I mean, he was 8 for 64. He finished 19 of 79. And Nebraska slowed him down. And a lot of it was, and maybe it was because of the conditions, but I also thought as Tony White adjusted, and they went with 5 down linemen and they used 2 jacks, and then they were switching up fronts. Whether it be, they weren't the 3-3-5 that everybody talks about. They were running a 4-4 at times as well. So they were giving looks to Rutgers that they were telling them, hey, throw the football. And they played Soraka, the former Minnesota OC, Rutgers OC, right into their hands. Because unlike Illinois 2 weeks ago, Nebraska was able to shut down any semblance of the passing game. So if they can't run, they're playing right into Nebraska's hands. But I was really surprised that they came out with the wind in the second quarter, and all of a sudden it was Kalakmanis that they were like, whoa, why are we throwing the football this much when they were having success? But I think Tony White changing the defense, Nebraska able to get pressure internally in the interior, and the fact that they could not consistently complete passes, that threw Rutgers completely off. So kudos to Nebraska defensively, but I thought Rutgers made some head-scratching decisions, whether it be in special teams or in offensive play calling yesterday in key moments.
If we want to get back to Sat here, I think there's a great comment in from Brian Snitley I want to hit, where he says, if the run game is going to be as predictable as it has been with the lead, add more tackle over with Mazuka a la Mark Whipple. That is kind of my thoughts exactly, in that you look at the second half. My biggest complaint yesterday, and upon my rewatch, I confirmed it to myself, the rushing attack was so damn predictable in that second half once you play with the lead, where I feel like that was a second half that was screaming for a Ja'Cory Barney jet sweep or fly sweep. Get him on the edge. I mean, those Rutgers linebackers were flowing downhill. They were expecting the inside run. That felt like a second half that was calling for something a little bit more creative like that, or to bring Heinrich Harburg into the football game, whether it be as a quarterback or just as eye candy, to try to get those Rutgers defenders thinking, second guessing. You didn't see much of that in the second half. What you saw was plenty of Dowdell and Johnson running in between the tackles, putting their head down, picking up 2 yards because there wasn't much room to run because Rutgers was expecting it.
That's the way it's been all season with Nebraska's run game, other than the Barney jet sweeps.
Mm. You saw a little more creativity in the first half. You saw there was the 3rd and 1 where they bring in Harburg as the eye candy. You brought in tackle over, as Brian said.
Bonner.
With that, the Bonner outside trap.
Yeah, they run that counter. They ran out of the I formation. I just think they wanted to establish and keep the running game going in the second half. Because let's see here, I wrote this down. In the first half, when Nebraska ran for 86 of their 97 rushing yards, and they were having success and they had some variety, but they also benefited because they were completing passes. I mean, you can see, and this is something they need to work on in the bye week and moving forward to Indiana, because you're going to have to score points the next 2 weeks to win a football game, or win a couple of football games, or be in a couple of football games, is when the quarterback isn't moving the offense, what do you do? Because you saw it really helped Satterfield when Raiola was completing passes and they were moving in the passing game, because they were running with more variety, whether it be counter, whether it be running out of the I formation. They were getting tackles. They were pulling guards. They had guys that had good kick-out blocks. Lutovsky had a nice kick-out block as he waited and Ramir ran by. I don't know. It got bogged down. I don't necessarily know it was as much as Rutgers, but just they couldn't get any of their elements going. And then it was like, hold on for dear life. Hey, defense, bail us out today. And then they got lucky enough. That's one thing that I worry about moving forward is Nebraska doesn't have on offense right now, is they still search for an identity. Do they want to be flashy? Do they just want to be, do they want to be liberal, or do they want to be conservative in this political season? What is portable? Like if Dylan has an off day in Bloomington, what is portable on offense that they know they're going to be able to do? And I think that's what they're still searching for through 6 games.
They can't just line it up and get 4 to 5 consistently.
Unless they bring in Mazuka on 3rd and 4th down and run behind him.
Sure. Unsuspend him, and then suspend him again for long yardage situations.
Yeah. Simple enough, right, Bill?
Because he was in for 6 snaps, and I think, whether you take the PFF grades with a grain of salt or not, I think he was the highest rated offensive lineman.
Is that right?
6 snaps. When he was on the field,
run blocker, yeah.
When he was on the field, you knew where they were going. And I think 5 of the 6 times they were successful, where they're just line it up and let's run it behind Mazuka. And with that jumbo package, they were able to get extra yardage.
And I think off the top of my head, I think 5 of those 6 were in the first half. And it should be noted with the PFF grades, I think every single time Mazuka has played this season, he's been Nebraska's highest rated offensive lineman. If that kind of clues you into how important he is as a Nebraska blocker, I think that's been a consistent story. Because I remember he was against Colorado. I think he was in the first game against UTEP as well. And then yesterday, he's Nebraska's best offensive lineman. It's not a skill reason why he's not playing, if that's not clear to anybody out there.
I don't think that's going to change unless there's an injury to a guard or a tackle.
I want to ask this. So you said the magic word, portability, Sharpie, with what's ahead. 5-1 is nothing to sneeze at. Well done, Nebraska. Defense is back in defensive form. Special teams is still something you got to cover. And offense hasn't put 4 quarters together. What are we expecting moving forward? All right, because Indiana is going to be ranked in the teens. Winnable game for Nebraska, losable game for Nebraska. Ohio State, we'll know just how for real they are after the Oregon trip next week, but they look great in the second half after they slept walk in the first half against Iowa. So what can you bank on with this offense? What are they good at? What can they do for 2 halves of football? Because they've looked super talented. They've looked pretty high level running the football at times. They've looked high level throwing the football at times. But then they disappear. Either they get figured out or adjustments are made. Something is causing Nebraska's first half in the Purdue game to be brutal, the second half of the Colorado game, the fourth quarter of the Illinois game. I'm just asking the question here, what can they turn to to help complement this defense. It's got to carry a missing offense for parts of a football game and a special team situation that is a detriment right now.
That's a good question. I think that's been the riddle ever since the UTEP game ended, because the second half of the Colorado game may have been more of a tell to what we should expect the rest of this season. Not that Colorado has some type of wizardry on the defensive side of the ball, but Nebraska got shut down. There were a lot of mistakes in that game. There were a lot of mistakes in the Illinois game. Purdue had some mistakes in it. For the most part, Nebraska they didn't turn the ball over in terms of fumbling yesterday, as I recall. I don't even think they put the ball on the carpet. Dylan had the bad interception. But I think, Nebraska at this point in the season, it's such a cliche, is what it is. But they have to have more consistent play, I think, defensively, to know that week in and week out, that defense is going to shut teams down. And Nebraska's got to do a better job of making adjustments offensively. The defense was a letdown in the Illinois game, and that's the reason for loss. So I'm glad that Ty and Nash and those guys listened to the Average Joe Sports Show, because I said this was the mulligan week, and I think Nash and Ty and company played extremely well against Rutgers and righted the wrongs of the Illinois game. But I think the defense has to be consistent. That's the main thing, and hopefully make adjustments offensively enough in second halves that you're not as predictable. Now, what that means is I don't know, because I think the run game is predictable from here on out.
Yeah, you're sitting, the thing, this discussion is kind of interesting because it's new around here. You're 5-1, and it comes down, do you believe the offense has another level to get to, that they can get to? I think there's a couple of things in the bye week on offense. First of all, they need to get into some self-scouting. One, they have to figure out, can they score points? It kind of seems like 28 is a ceiling right now against Power 4 teams. Man, you just watched Ohio State do what they did against Iowa. They scored 35. They're capable of hitting the X button. Indiana scored 41. So even if your defense plays well, you're going to need to score. You're going to put the ball in the end zone. Can they do that? And then I think another part of this whole offensive discussion that they're still kind of searching for an identity is they got to have some of their frontline guys be better. Like I'm telling you, the last 6 games, Banks and Naor need to be better. And there are flashes where they're good. They need to be better. And I think they have another level to go to that can help out Dylan. They also need to get everybody on the same page. Can they play 60 minutes of offensive football where when the offensive line is blocking well, the running back sees that hole? How many times yesterday, where did we see, boom, the running back ran into the back of the offensive lineman, who right on his right butt, there was a hole. I mean, hey, the hole is good for the soul. Contact is not when you're a running back. Just saying.
And it comes back to something we've talked about before on this show with understanding which running back is right for the moment.
Uh-huh.
If you watch Dowdell on zone blocking schemes, really, really struggles to find the right hole and hit it and pick up yardage, where that is kind of an Emmett Johnson special. Dowdell plays best with a pulling guard or a pulling guard and tackle, that power, that counter look, that trap look. That's where he's at his best, where the blocking scheme opens the hole, as opposed to, hey, we're going to let the defensive line, it's kind of the zone blocking scheme, is you let the defensive line determine where your hole is going to be. You read that, you hit the hole. Not his strength. He struggled with that again yesterday. That's an Emmett Johnson specialty. And I mean, that's just a little thing, but it's about understanding what your running backs do well and having the right guy in the game at the right moment based on play call. It still hasn't necessarily matched up.
Do you use a fullback more then?
I like Liebentritt. I like Mazuka. I like counter right side. That's been their best running play all season long.
Because I think Rule said last night that likes what Liebentritt's been doing. So do you go more with a fullback look? I mean, periodically you see that, maybe 5 snaps a game, but do you go more with a fullback in front of the tailback and hit the hole first and make a little more of a crease than what you're getting when you're running directly into the offensive line?
Yeah, there's the other part of the bye week, because I think this, again, you're 5-1. Take it and run. When you look around college football, is you got to do some self-scouting and take a step back. It comes as a much-needed time just to get a break for everybody. But can Nebraska run the football without the element of any quarterback run game, which they don't have? I mean, we kind of know it. It might be the elephant in the room, or maybe it's the loud voice. But how can they figure out, with no respect for a quarterback run game, how they run the football with their collection of talent and trying to win one-on-one up front?
So you're saying that Dylan Raiola cannot run the football like another former Nebraska quarterback who wore the number 15, that being Craig Sundberg.
Wow, good pull.
I'm not talking Tommy Frazier, okay? But
when I think of quarterbacks wearing 15 that ran the football, you're right. Craig Sundberg comes to my mind.
I mean, in my head, I was thinking, God,
there's different tiers. There's different tiers. I think we know that Dylan's not going to be in Tommy Frazier's class to run the football as a quarterback. But maybe if there's that Craig Sundberg level, that tier, that there's at least a hint, that just maybe. No,
well, I thought you might be going. I was like, man, Richard Torres wasn't a running quarterback.
That's a name I forgot about.
Wow.
Guys,
there's this whole discussion about the running the football and Dylan and everything. I think and I think we've done a good job of like breaking down the issues of what happened yesterday and maybe what can be fixed. We have to probably also take a step back about yesterday and go, Greg Schiano's a really good defensive coach. And they made adjustments during the game with a freshman quarterback. And I don't think that, Nebraska responded as well. So let's also factor in Schiano knows how to coach defense.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, for as much as we think that offense left a lot to be desired yesterday, they did enough to win the football game. You relied upon your defense. To get back to an earlier comment, you didn't turn the football over. And I think you can possibly tip your cap to Satterfield and Raiola as well, because with that wind, I mean, you saw it on the other side with Callie McManus. Passes are going to get away from you. I think there's going to be opportunities for interceptions a lot whenever you have swirling wind like that. And you didn't turn the football over late in a football game that I think we would have seen Nebraska in years past turn the football over and give Rutgers a better chance. You trusted your defense. You didn't get too aggressive in that second half. You didn't put your defense in positions based on turnovers to play with their backs against the wall. You did enough to win that football game. So I think we can maybe say Satterfield's game plan left some to be desired, but at the end of the day, a win is a win. And it didn't look how we wanted it to look. But we've seen the offense in years past for Husker football set up the defense for failure, and Nebraska's offense didn't do that yesterday. Could they have put the nail in the coffin? Yes, but you didn't set your defense up for failure.
Wasn't it kind of like, and it didn't, 2 weeks ago, and I think the defense really learned a lesson. They got embarrassed against Illinois, and look at how they've responded the last 2 weeks, and they learned from the Illinois game. We would have said if Nebraska would have won that game against Illinois, we would have said, whoo, boy, the defense struggled, but man, the offense bailed them out. We're kind of doing the reverse because there is a lot of stuff about the game yesterday that old Nebraska loses because the field was tilted that entire second half. Yeah. Think about this. Rutgers took the ball across the 50 into Nebraska's territory 9 times, and they scored 1 touchdown. They had the weird, nobody in the ballpark knew they were going to kick a field goal. Okay, so they run with the fake, but they benefited from, some mistakes by Nebraska. They got all the way down to the 2-yard line, then they went backwards. They only one time Nebraska was able to get off the field on 3 and out. A lot of things in that game would have in the past. Nebraska loses that game. They found a way to win with bend don't break, gonna make a big play defense. It's just, I was going back through the box score while Elijah was doing the rewatch. I was going through the analytic box score. There's a lot of things that if you just look at the box score and you go beyond the regular box score, you're like, Rutgers won this game. They didn't. Nebraska won another 1-score game against Rutgers. I think college football and this team in particular, it's a week-by-week thing. And it's when you kick off, you got 60 minutes to find a way to win a game. And Nebraska did that yesterday when there was a lot of things honestly, that should have worked against them.
We're 30 minutes in here. I'm going to take it to special teams to underscore your point, Gary. Nebraska won a game when they had 2 blocked punts. And I think the stat that is always brought up is if you block a punt, you have a 90% chance to win a football game. Rutgers blocked 2. What's the stat on that?
Yeah, isn't that an Urban Meyer stat? He always used that at Ohio State. And, and Ohio State was great in special teams.
Nebraska, in addition to Rutgers starting getting into Nebraska territory 9 times, Nebraska had 3 drives start at the 2, 2, and 3
consecutively.
Right, and that leads to them getting into Nebraska territory. But typically, if a team is starting with such poor field position and they just punt the ball to get it out, and that one thing leads to the other. It wasn't just that they drove into Nebraska territory; they were starting there because Nebraska's offense couldn't do anything anyway, right? They were just trying to get the ball out. So that was really remarkable that what they punted 4 times from about the 40-yard line. Yeah, you're right. If you look at the box, which I have right here and will memorize, you would think that perhaps Rutgers probably won that game, especially if you look at what their running game did in the first quarter. But good on Nebraska's defense to play as tough as it did. And I mentioned this on Schmidt's show last night. Riley Van Poppel played and got in there on they have 6 plays inside the 5-yard line after their second block punt. He had a holding penalty. Van Poppel was in there, and he was key, just like he was at Illinois a year ago. And kudos to him to know that they're going to redshirt you, but to still stay engaged. To know that if your number's called 44, that you got to get the job done in a key moment. And he was part of that defensive stand. So I was really impressed. Mazuka may have had 6 snaps on offense. I'm not sure how many snaps Riley Van Poppel had coming in and playing his 3rd game. They're going to have to be careful as to where number 4 is. But I think that it was critical and you go back to what you said earlier about Tony White, changing things up and going with a 4-4 look and maybe look like a 5-2 at times. But that defense was engaged when it had to be, and the goal line stand was fantastic.
Oh, and another guy, speaking of the goal line stand, that hasn't gotten enough love, in my opinion, on the defensive side of the ball yesterday for his performance was Deshaun Singleton. Deshaun Singleton made a huge play on the goal line. It was a similar scheme to what Illinois did to score against you, where Rutgers did it differently. They brought the guy in motion, but then sent him out to the flat with the play action. Deshaun Singleton makes it through the wash pre-snap in the defensive backfield, tracks his man across the field, and makes a fantastic play, a tackle for a loss. That was his best play of the day, but he was making plays all over the place. And it's a little bit quieter from the safety position, but he really, really quietly had a great day. That stood out to me on the rewatch. I don't think he necessarily got the love on social media and from the TV broadcast that he deserved. He had a really, really good day. That was a stock-raising day for a future NFL career for Deshaun Singleton.
Well, he was also kind of overshadowed by James Williams.
Yeah.
James, we'll get the big game.
He made a lot of money too.
Well, was it overshadowed by a curious day by Mr. Buford? Boy, he got on the roller coaster, and you didn't know if it was going around, or if it was going straight, or if it was going uphill, or if it was going downhill. He had quite the interesting day yesterday.
He did.
He got the pick. He got the gift, and then he got beat too on that
and he got
the only 3rd down conversion,
and he got pulled.
Yeah.
Can I sneak this in here about defensive backs? Because again, the bye week comes at a much needed time. You're probably not the rest of the year going to get 100% Tommy Hill, which is unfortunate. But Sierra Wright has shown up, and now he's like, whoa. I mean, the Sierra Wright and James Williams get a black shirt on Monday, or whenever they come back to practice during the bye week. But what happens with the defensive backfield moving forward? Does the emergence of Sierra Wright, and if you get something out of Tommy Hill enough where you can move Buford, and then let's also keep this in the back of our mind, Bly Hill is close. So I'll be the last 6 games where you're not going to play big people, as Matt Rule alluded to after the game. He said, hey, our guys were fired up because we're playing big people football. You're going to have to run with wide receivers a little bit more. Does the defensive backfield rotation look a little bit different if you squeeze enough out of Tommy Hill, the emergence of Sierra Wright, and then when does Bly Hill start to get back into the mix?
That's the question, because your secondary could look like this, You could have Sierra and Tommy or Bly. Those are your two corners. You move Buford back to that safety spot.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
And then do you look at rotating Hartzog in and out? You've got Giff and you've got Singleton. I mean, you're more versatile to go against an Indiana offense, to your point, or a USC, or whatever Ohio State's going to throw at you.
And don't forget about Jabin Wright as well, because he's still on kind of a pitch count. So the back end will look kind of curious the next couple of weeks, because Rourke and Ohio State's offense will stress you a little bit, and they'll try and attack that third level.
And it's two offenses that it'd be really nice to have Tommy Hill back for.
Yeah,
it's been back-to-back weeks for Tommy Hill where you think maybe he's going to be a go. He's practicing. He's not a go on Saturday, and that's the issue with plantar fasciitis, is that is a lingering injury. Can he get healthy during the bye week? That's going to be really, really big to see. Because
just get him good to go for Bloomington and Columbus. Well, you've survived without him.
How solid do you feel if your two outside corners are Tommy Hill and Sierra Wright? Those are two guys that have been playing at an all Big Ten level this season.
Hey, Sierra Wright, and you know, he's playing the best he has played, even better than any time at USC. Just imagine if he would have showed up earlier than July. He was trying to pick up quickly the defense. Hey, what's the pecking order? How do I have to get on the field? What are the standards here compared to USC? What he's doing now, because he's sticky in coverage, and he's also got some swag. Man, he is not afraid to stick his head in there. And sometimes you get defensive backs that like just playing that one-on-one coverage. Sierra Wright is like, no, I'll come up and I'll grab a guy that's a running back. I'll stick my head in there. He has been I think they knew what they had, but maybe they were thinking, maybe he'll turn the corner next year. Man, his time has arrived. He's changed the conversation at defensive back. But something you alluded to, Schmidt, that I think also deserves a lot of discussion as part of the defense as a whole is James Williams. I think this is a story that it's his story to tell. It kind of started to get told yesterday. It's kind of known. But, man, we've been longing for a Randy Gregory type pass rusher, a Grant Wistrom, Jared Crick, those kind of guys on the edge. Do we have that guy that wears 90 and last year was possibly going back to ICC instead? He comes to Nebraska?
It's a find. First and foremost, the whole process of, here's the tryout, son. Come on down. For years, Iowa Western dudes have gone elsewhere. So kudos for Nebraska finally to recognize one and get one. And then to see what he's been doing on the practice field, elevate him like they did a year ago, and then keep working with him. And he's a guy, too, because he's part of that NASCAR package, him and Princewell that come in, at least yesterday, and then partially against Illinois. Both those guys had better days yesterday getting after the quarterback than they did against Illinois. So that was good to see. But, no, he's got the passion. He's had to kind of learn the standard. And, his story was full of emotion, not only on the sideline yesterday, but afterwards. And I think you're right. I mean, he is so twitchy off the edge. He's athletic, he's fast, and he's been working hard on not just the meat and potato moves, but also the film work, right? The film work said that spin moves are your go-to move against Rutgers edge. And he employed that several times, could have had 3 sacks and almost did yesterday.
And maybe he played well enough, Schmitty, because you said Iowa Western. I don't blame you because his bio on Huskers.com says Iowa Western, but it was Iowa Central. Maybe he's played well enough that we can get his bio updated and correct.
Was it last year's Northwestern game? That's where he had his kind of debut, and everybody in the press box, as I recall, when he was making plays, kept looking down at the roster, going, "Who is that guy again?" Because nobody had talked about him at all until 90 goes on the field. And I think yesterday when he was on the field, people are looking out there going, well, he's going to make a play.
Well, he's played, 6 games, and he's got 10 sacks in his career.
That's nice.
So how do I say this? Nebraska needed him last year. So Nebraska coaches were sliding into his DMs, and he was like, okay, what am I going to do? First and foremost, you have to understand that the school part is difficult for James. So that's a struggle. And then you mix in being an athlete, so you are a student athlete. He didn't know what he was going to do last summer. All of a sudden, Nebraska saw him on film, and a couple of coaches slid into his DMs and they said, hey, we really want you to come to Lincoln to our post-grad camp. And he was like, but I'm not graduated yet. And they were like, you need to come here. So he came, and Terrence Knighton fell in love with him. On the day that he worked out, and he said, I got to get you to Matt Rule. We're going to Matt Rule's office. James tells the story of, he was like, wait a minute, Matt Rule was with the Carolina Panthers. That Matt Rule? All of a sudden, Matt Rule says, what's it take right now to get you to commit to Nebraska? And he was like, okay, I'm in. And so they work through getting him into school, and then the adjustment to the level of football, the school, and at that time, Nebraska needed him. I watched him yesterday, and the emotion, most people are seeing the post-game stuff, which is, man, a ringing endorsement for a coach is more than somebody that has a whistle around their neck.
Mm-hmm.
And what Terrence Knight and James Williams have developed as a bond. But it's almost like he needed Nebraska more. He's gone through some stuff with his family towards the tail end of last year. Maybe he was not going to come back. He had to work through some things. And again, he's got to get the schooling down. But Jesus, this has got a chance to be one of the great stories of perseverance and just how football is family. And I'm happy for the kid because he's a great interview. I mean, he starts talking and you're like, whoa, how old are you? And then, oh, by the way, I think he's still raw as a pass rusher. So the sky's the limit for him. And I'll be curious moving forward how they use him, because I'll tell you what, teams will be aware of 90, but a big reason why he was successful yesterday, he spent time in the film room studying what the tackle was doing. And if he was leaning backwards or what way he was leaning, he picked up on film. So he knew when he saw that tackle start to lean or start to get back on his haunches, he knew what the play was. And so that helped him yesterday. That's pretty damn impressive.
And Gary, you did a really good job laying out the James Williams story. I'll give a shout out to my buddy Chris in the Boys Down Bad podcast. They had, I think, was the first interview with him way back when he first committed to Nebraska. And I think one of the things that you almost undersold, Gary, was the way that Nebraska's coaches were able to find a diamond in the rough. Not only was this a JUCO guy, this was a rotational JUCO guy. He was not a starter on his JUCO team. He was a guy that came in situationally to pass rush. And somehow this Husker coaching staff found him. And that's kind of what underscores your point about, like, oh my God, Matt Rule wants to talk to me? You guys want me to come out to the Nebraska camp? He was not a starter in community college. They saw the potential, though. One of the things that he talked about was the old 3-cone drill, where they had him run it at that post-grad camp. And whenever they get the number back, they're like, James, the number you put up is comparable to first-round edge rushers in the NFL draft. He had giant feet, plus that explosiveness and that bend ability to get the agility. And they're like, hey, you're a future star. Like, you're putting up testing numbers right now, and that's a limited sample size, just a 3-cone drill. Like, that's what first-round draft picks do as an edge rusher. Like, come to Nebraska, we can develop you, we can turn you into that. He took the leap of faith, being a guy that was rotational at community college, to come to Nebraska and bet on himself. And through all the adversity he's gone through, which is kind of some of the emotion that he was showing on the sideline yesterday, is able to come back and, as he said post-game, go win you a football game, which is what he did with his pass rushing ability in the second half. Incredible story.
Nebraska also diving into the measurables, not only with the 3-cone, but his wingspan, is pretty massive. That along with his work on film and just the ability to keep working with this staff is impressive. Never just walking by a rock. They're always overturning one to see what they can do to help the football team. And this story is really cool and good for James, man. That was fun to see. And as tough of a game as yesterday was to watch offensively, Nebraska fans do love watching the defense go out, win it, and tee off to finish a ball game. And they've had a chance to see that more times than not this year in some closer ball games.
Did anybody have a flashback fear that they were going to score with 3 minutes to go in the game, and then go for two? And
I know Schmidt did.
I'm on the mic with Elijah before we start post game, and I'm swearing up a storm. I don't feel well. The dogs are pissing me off. And then, oh, great, they get the football back because it's another 3 and out, and just burn a little clock, punt, fine, but no, it's another quick possession and you kick it away. And I'm like, the defense doesn't deserve this. I know they're a team. Great. The defense doesn't deserve this. They played out of their mind all game long. And one drive from the 50, they get points on it. For it to be an overtime affair or a 15-14 loss because you let them hang around, all you needed was one more score. That's it. The entire second half, and you couldn't do a thing. So yeah, to answer your question, Bill.
Well, one of the reasons why
fear factor level at 12 out of 5,
Yes.
yeah.
One of the reasons I thought, I don't think we're going to revert back to the last 10 to 20 years. It was Williams in the pass rush. I thought that defense played just so good. Ty Robinson, Nash Hotmaker, Sear Wright, James Williams.
Embrace the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought that they had played so well and they'd been so motivated that they were going to make the plays that they needed to make, and they weren't going to get burned, and they didn't. So Nebraska wins 14-7, goes to 5-1, survive and advance.
This defense's downfall was greatly exaggerated. A lot of people were talking about after the Illinois game. They're going to be fine. Tony White didn't have his best day against Illinois. Had a great day yesterday. Also, while we're talking about this last drive here, hat tip Brian Buschini making Rutgers go drive the field on you to close that game. Great day from him.
By the way, with that, and we probably, I feel like this is probably the transition to the special teams discussion, is I don't think if you have a rookie punter, so to speak, like Camden Cook is punting, I think Nebraska's in trouble yesterday after Buschini got hurt, because the one thing Buschini started to do, and I don't know that Rule with Camden Cook says, hey, Camden, do you think you'd throw a pass like he would with Buschini, who was Nebraska's leading passer in the second half, but that's you won 14-7, is look at how Buschini recognized the coverage. And instead of they were asking him to one-step punt, when he saw that they were not going to crash the A gap, he took his full time and he went 3 steps and he boomed the 69-yarder. But what was Rutgers not bringing the house on that on that punt? What were they doing?
That's, you were 2 for 2 blocking punts. You'd think maybe you just overthought it. Well, they can't, for the love of God, be this bad up the middle a third time. Surely they'll correct it.
They choked. There was that one, and then there was one where Buschini was punting out of the end zone as well, where I thought they were going to come after it, and they didn't.
You mean Rutgers got to start the ball on the 27 that time? Yeah.
Well, and I think that one, I kind of liked what they were doing. Elijah, initially, I thought the same thing. But they would show right over the interior of the punt coverage on the line, on the shield. They would show 2 guys coming. They dropped 2 guys back, so they had 2 blockers for the returner. I actually kind of like that. Now, remember, this is Schiano's wheelhouse. They block kicks and they turn them into points. They weren't able to yesterday, but it was just, I don't know. Special teams. Is it the wrong personnel? Is it the wrong technique? What is missing? Because there was another part of this game when after it got to be 14-7, what was Ramir doing? Not fair catching the kickoff. Nebraska thought there was going to be an onside. So essentially there were 10 guys up 40 yards away from Ramir. All he could have done, he could have just fair caught it, and Nebraska gets it at the 25. Instead, he returns it. Nebraska gets the benefit of the hit that got him 15 yards, but still, That's an IQ play on special teams that continues to dumbfound everybody in the ballpark watching Nebraska special teams through 6
What are
weeks.
they doing? I'm going to just ask the question. What are they doing? Your punter saved you yesterday. Field goals have been an adventure. IGC's been better. He's been fine as a return guy. But just from a decision-making standpoint, I have to think that it's all reviewed during the week. It's repped. They're practicing. But when it gets to the moment, how are they so inconsistent all year long?
But didn't Rule say when he got on campus 2 years ago that we're the kickoff's a play and we're not going to call fair catch. We're going to go. That was one of the early messages about special teams is we're going to be aggressive. We're not going to fair catch. We're not going to down the ball in the end zone. So I think that's the mentality of it. So I really wasn't surprised that he ran it out just because I think that's what Nebraska's always, or at least the last 2 years, has thought of the kickoff. It's a play. Now, was he setting him up? I've never seen a return man go into the slide like Peyton Manning. That was bizarre. Maybe he was thinking, I probably shouldn't have done this. I'm just going to go down now, and he got clocked, fortunately for Nebraska, and fortunately he wasn't hurt on the play.
Oh, there goes Schmidt. That's interesting.
Yeah, and they've got again the much needed bye week to do some self scouting. We don't know how far Alvano is away. Let's be honest. You're gonna need somebody to split the pipes in the next couple of weeks, and we still don't know. Nebraska didn't have to attempt a field goal yesterday. We still don't know where that is. I know we're going to sift through 2 snaps on a PAT. It's just that's an area where if Nebraska is to make the next leap, I think we're all set that the defense is going to be fine. They're going to be able to hold their own. There's going to be moments in the next 2 weeks where they're going to be challenged unlike they've been challenged this year because they're not going to see an offense like Rutgers until the end of the year with Iowa. They're going to see some more dynamic, try and spread it around, play you in space offenses, so they're going to have to adjust. But what is the offense and what does special teams look like for the next 6 weeks?
I think offensively you have options. We talk about balance. We talk about Nebraska being able to throw it, being able to run it, but can they throw it and run it when they're set up to do so? And what I mean by that is, all right, this is what the defense is giving us. Can you go execute it? And I have real questions about that in the run game. And then from a passing standpoint, it is going to be critical to keep Dylan, A, from getting rattled, B, from getting smacked around. I mean, he's been sacked quite a bit this season, especially yesterday's game. So what do they lean to? I pray that, if you're a Nebraska fan, you find that bread and butter, that identity, that go-to. Maybe you can drill down on that versus asking your freshmen to go air it out and win it, or praying your run game is going to get you 4 or 5 on first down. You need to have a script in the second half that'll match your first half, and maybe they get there. That's my concern for the rest of October.
Let me ask you,
into November, frankly, Bill and Sharpie and Elijah, is at this point in the season, can they get better? The answer is yes, but will they? And I don't know. I don't know if they are maxed out at 3 to 4 touchdowns a ball game.
well, let me ask you this, and this kind of goes back to the earlier discussion on offense, and now bringing up the special teams is the fact that Nebraska has such a problem with special teams and a lack of confidence in field goal kicking. Does that put too much pressure on the offense to chase 7 and not chase 3?
No, that is a valid question that I wonder if the guy that is triggering the offense thinks that way as well. We can't settle for 3. I got to find a way to get the ball in the end zone.
Settle for trying for 3.
Yeah.
Right? It'd be one thing if you knew you could settle for 3, but we got to score a touchdown because we can't try for 3. And does that put pressure on the quarterback, the play calling, to be a little too perfect and not be too Conservative. I shouldn't say conservative because we're talking about the run game too, but I just wonder if that is an issue with trying to be perfect with your passing game and whatnot. But they got to solve that going forward the second half of the season.
I mean, you got a big opportunity coming up this week with a bye week. It's kind of I think a good week for how Matt Rhule runs his football program to get things cleaned up, not be worried about scouting another opponent and getting ready for them at the end of the week, to really lock in on, as you guys talked about, the self-scout, dive into what you do well, what you do poorly, and getting some things cleaned up. And dare I say, not to look too far ahead here, with Indiana still 2 weeks away, and I know we got plenty of shows to preview Indiana, I like the way this sets up for Nebraska, and that you go into a bye week, you got Indiana riding high. I mean, their offense is averaging 40-plus points a game, if I remember correctly. They are doing a fantastic job. They're the first team in America to be bowl eligible. They're flying high. Whereas Nebraska comes off a game where, yeah, you win, yeah, you're 5-1, you're one away from bowl eligibility, but there's plenty of motivation to get better and get cleaned up. Indiana, after a bye week, is playing, I think, the best team that they've played so far this year in Nebraska. They're flying high. Are they able to handle the bye week with maturity in a way that Indiana, I mean, they haven't gone into a bye week with this much success in a season in years and years and years. And it's different guys, I understand that, but are they going to be able to handle that moment of, people are talking about Indiana, you're 6-0. There's a chance that game day or big noon kickoff can be in town in 2 weeks. Are they able to handle that? Because I have a feeling that Nebraska, based on how this season has gone for them, is still going to have plenty of motivation to get better headed into a bye. I think it sets up well for Nebraska.
And I think if you want to guess the line, it wouldn't surprise me if Indiana's a touchdown favorite in that game.
-6, I think, is something that was floating out last night. Anyway, early lines. It's the Average Joe Sports Show Sunday live edition. That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We'll wrap with some.
Can I throw one more thing in there? Can I just insert something that Elijah said, because it's important in the bye week for the self-scouting. But you remember last year when Nebraska started to make the transition and that stretch post Michigan of Illinois, Northwestern, and then Purdue, is they found some young guys that finally got into the mix. I don't know that there's young guys that are going to be in the mix this go around. That's why I keep going back to, I think Nebraska to take the next step on the offensive side of the football, it's the older guys that have to step up, not find younger guys to add to the mix. I think it's Banks, Nair, Dowdell, Emmett, Ramir, Fedoni, who they tried to get involved a lot yesterday. I think it's their veteran guys. And then even on the offensive line, that's where they're going to make their hay, is those guys have to step up for the next part of the season, not to find a young guy who has kind of played a little bit like a Carter Nelson's going to emerge even more. I think it's the veteran guys on offense they'll have to rely on to get to where they want to go, which I think there's still another layer of offense to go that hopefully includes points, because you got to score points, man.
You know, with Nebraska's first half of the season, the schedule, the way the games have gone, the tight moments, letting teams hang around, all of that factoring in, you know, as we turn the page to the second half, Nebraska's seen and done about everything to either win a ball game, survive a ball game, or frankly, not hang on to a ball game, the Illinois ball game. And I think it'll serve them well moving forward into the second half of the season, because there's not much they haven't seen or experienced with what roller coaster they've been on. What do you guys think of the Big Ten with week to week kill or be killed, with old Fleck rowing that boat? He was going to skull crush an official on the sideline last night. I thought that was quite funny. Get the
he and Lance Leipold both. He and Lance Leipold had the most epic of meltdowns on a sideline that Bo Pelini was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe."
Get the
out of
my face as he's pointing to the sideline.
Lance Leipold, oh my gosh, but his quarterback got, or his receiver, I guess, got.
What type of dossier does Miami have on ACC officials? My God.
Is PJ Fleck in Gainesville today?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Anyway, I digress.
I don't know, man. He was on another level. This is why this sport is so great, I mean, we spent an hour talking about a team that's 5-1, and you're like, how good? It's a win is a win. We had a game last night in the chaos of how great college football was, that in Miami, Florida, that game, by the way, ended at 2:30 in the morning. We had a 15-yard penalty for simulating brandishing a weapon in the Minnesota USC game. I mean, the sport is great. It always delivers, and it usually, guys, we've all been around this so long. We're looking ahead to next week when you get Ohio State and Oregon and some other big games like Texas and Oklahoma. It's the week when you don't expect much, where you get the chaos, and that's what we got yesterday. Sport's great.
You look ahead, right?
I thought Arkansas was going to get blown out of the water. Hat tip to them. If you talk about did you guys see the South Carolina player against Ole Miss pull out the imaginary shotgun and shoot Jackson Dart? You guys see that one?
It was an automatic weapon. It was not a shotgun.
I thought I saw a pump in there. I could be wrong, though. But that was an easy 15 yards for the Ole Miss offense. That was fantastic.
But then he reached to his hip pad and grabbed a bump stock. So
on the lighter side of that, when Sierra Wright makes a play, I know the guy's a Hollywood actor and all that, but when Sierra Wright makes a play and he celebrates, it's really kind of fun to watch. We don't, and it's more G and PG as opposed to, the 15-yard violent Grand Theft Auto variety, right? So I love when Sierra Wright makes a play because he does these little dances. But yesterday was unbelievable. And look, I know people talked about Nebraska storming the court, storming the field. I say Nebraska strolls the court and strolls the field. Court storming is what they do in the SEC. And what Arkansas did after their win over Tennessee yesterday, that was amazing. Vanderbilt, that was amazing.
Police escort for the goalpost, Billy, and then they fished him out of the river to sell.
Yeah, exactly. So kudos to the SEC for, they are the definition of court storming. And SEC Shorts is going to be off the charts this week on YouTube. No doubt about it.
Hey, I thought yesterday was a great day for college football, where you started in a place that doesn't normally get game day, and Berkeley looked lit. There wasn't a protest. They were there to celebrate college football. Nobody was chained to the trees like Nebraska fans saw when Nebraska played in Berkeley in the late 90s.
Yep.
There was a great scene, and then you watch the atmosphere in Nashville, where Vanderbilt doesn't win, and they beat Alabama for the first time ever. And then you look at what happened in Fayetteville, and Sam Pittman has the same record as Lincoln Riley in the last 12 games of 5-7. I mean, it looks so great that places that haven't had success, they won, and you feel like, man, this is a great sport. And then you go, is a 3-loss team going to make the playoffs? Because who is elite these days?
Yep.
Who's elite and who's going to be able to do what Matt Rule's talked about? Just go 1-0 each week, because you're on the heels, fellas, of so many wow wins last weekend. Can you settle down and handle your business at Vandy on the road? No, you couldn't. Could you handle your business in a must-have in Fayetteville after drilling Oklahoma like Tennessee did? No. I mean, it is week to week, and it is, to your point, you survived and advanced, Bill, with a 14-7 win. That's the world of business in college football. Week to week, it's NFL-like, man. You're going to probably drop one.
For all that's been said about NIL and the transfer portal and how it's ruining college football, it really disperses the talent well. Like those guys that are backups at those high major, the Georgias and the Bamas and the Ohio States that want playing time, they go off to the Vandys of the world and Arkansas and all these places. Disperses the talent. We've seen it in college basketball. I think it's made March Madness more fun, the portal and NIL, where I feel like we've been seeing more upsets, more dispersed talent. We're seeing it in college football now, too, where aside from your top couple teams, which even as we saw yesterday with Bama going down, that doesn't always matter, but there's a lot of parity in numbers, I'd say about number 10 in the country to about number 40 in the country. Not much of a gap separating those.
Yeah, I think Jeff Schwartz had a great tweet last night, the former NFL offensive lineman. He played at Oregon, big, huge Ducks fan. And he tweeted out, the results of today and tonight in college football are always why I don't get too worked up when you win a clunker. The alternative is way worse. I thought that's appropriate for today's
Nailed
college
it.
football.
Hey, real quick, on the antithesis of field storming, there are more people on this show panel and in the stream watching than were at the Stanford Virginia Tech game yesterday on the farm. That was embarrassing. And if I'm the Pac-2, I'm not even sure I extend an invitation to Stanford to come back.
Yeah, the David Shaw days and the Harbaugh days are long gone.
Long gone.
COVID killed football at Stanford.
Yeah.
Hey, but to be fair, we thought football was dead at Cal.
Yeah, but it's not like Cal
year.
has been a world beater. I think they've got Justin Wilcox is a really good coach, but what do they just have 2 winning seasons in the last 8? They got off to a good start this year. And they probably should have won last night, but the ACC needs Miami to not lose.
Yeah, that's very evident the last 2 weeks. We'll be back at you with a bye week edition. We'll huddle up on if there's a Sunday brunch edition next Sunday, but possibly leaning that way. It's the Average Joe Sports Show. Like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes, the AJ Sports Pod. Follow us on Twitter. Appreciate all of you checking us out in the stream. Good to have you in, Billy D, Gary Sharp, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, and we'll holler at you midweek for a bye week edition with the Average Joe Sports Show. Have a good Sunday.